problem for the 49ers would be if Christian McCaffrey was sitting, Debo was sitting, Trent Williams was sitting, and Aaron Banks was sitting. All of those players did not practice yesterday. Now, it was the first practice of the week because of the Monday night game. So some of those people could just be resting because of travel. It'll be interesting to see who is limited and who goes. Isaiah Oliver was also limited yesterday, which is terrifying because if he was to not go, worst case scenario, that would be Ambry Thomas back there. So, how do you feel about these injuries? If you were Kyle Shanahan, would you sit certain players, especially because US Bank Turf Field or US Bank Stadium has turf field that has caused a lot of injuries this year? Justin Jefferson, we were just talking about, he got his foot stuck and ended up injuring his hamstring. Last week, Travis Kelce injured his foot on the field. And, oh yeah, Mike Williams for the Dolphins tore his ACL on the field. So, the Vikings have actually came out and said that they're going to be replacing the field at the end of the year, but the 49ers are playing on it next week. I'm kind of thinking, okay, with Debo, it's a shoulder injury. That's maybe you can play through that if it's a pain tolerance thing. But if you're Trent Williams, if you're Kyle Shanahan, do you want him planting his foot on that turf, really trying to step into his ankle? Are you sitting anyone? Are you going, like, if it's a pain tolerance thing, are you going, or do you feel hesitant? I know a lot of people, myself included, have talked about potentially sitting Christian McCaffrey for 2 weeks and having him come out totally healthy. Doesn't seem like Kyle Shanahan is thinking that way, because when asked about Christian McCaffrey's usage, he said that he loves how much he's been utilized. But how are you feeling about these injuries so far? Obviously, earlier on in the week, with the game not being until Monday.
Yeah, they're a concern. They're definitely a concern. I mean, we'll go in order. We'll start with Christian McCaffrey. I think oblique injuries are huge. I think that they are, undervalued. I don't think people really understand how hard it is to play with an oblique injury. And that is why, if I'm the 49ers, I'd probably sit Christian McCaffrey this week. I wouldn't even be surprised if they try and sit him through the bye week. They play Cincinnati next week, I believe, at home, and then they have a bye week. I wouldn't be surprised if they sit Christian McCaffrey for 2 consecutive games, despite him being as integral as he is to the offense. I think the biggest injury, though, is Trent Williams. I've dubbed Christian McCaffrey as the most valuable player on this team, but the player that you don't want to lose the most on this team is Trent Williams. The reason is the drop-off at left tackle from Trent Williams to Jalen Moore is significant, and I think that also puts your quarterback at risk. I think that that's an issue as well. You go back, I mean, an example I point to is the 2020 game. Jimmy Garoppolo got drilled against the Jacksonville Jaguars when Jalen Moore had to come back in. I mean, that's just one example. You just don't want your backup quarterback, or you don't want your starting quarterback, the guy who you believe is your franchise guy, getting mauled on his blind side, especially. And so I think Williams is the big one. He noted he was playing through a ton of pain. Probably a low ankle sprain is what it seems. But I mean, it's a lot of pain. The good thing is that Trent, I don't think he'll practice this week, which means Jalen Moore should get all of the first team reps. Trent's a guy who you can just have him go on game day if he feels he can go. I wouldn't expect him to practice this week. I think it'd just be a rehab week. You give Jalen Moore all the first team reps, try and get him acclimated in case he needs to go. And if he does, he goes. But if not, you see if Trent plays on game day. Deebo Samuel, he has a shoulder issue, obviously. This is one where you do want to nurse. You don't want it to get worse because they can linger at times. But I think he's the least of the 3 concerns between the injuries. Wouldn't be surprised if he goes on Monday.
I completely agree. If I was Kyle, I would hopefully lean towards playing Debo, having him be that yak guy, the short little dump off guy. If Christian McCaffrey is sitting, he can take some carries along with Elijah Mitchell and Mason. I think it will be smart also just to get Kyle Shanahan in a rhythm with those other running backs. But yeah, like what happened in last year in 2021, Debo can definitely take over in that running back role if he is needed to as well. He's been very effective with the ball in his hands. I personally, and it's scary, right? Because you don't want to lose a game because you're in competition with the Eagles. You want that number 1 seed. But I think I would strongly consider sitting Trent Williams this week if there's any risk of re-injury, because on that turf, when you're planting, because when you think of offensive linemen, they're putting all their weight, because you have to ground and then try to defend another 300-pound man from pushing you back. So your ankles are taking so much force. And with that field, I can just we're saying that how vital he is, and I just feel the disappointment that would happen if he's planting and accidentally gets a high ankle sprain because he twists his ankle wrong because he can't totally stabilize it, or even a knee injury could happen that way because if your lower body isn't stable, you're going to be compensating with other parts of your body. And if anything happened that held him out for longer than a game and for the most important part of the season, that would be way more detrimental than trying to scheme, with Jalen Moore for the Vikings game. But, you are right. I have hesitation saying that because we're saying that now. But if Jalen Moore's in there and Trent Williams, could have fought through injury and Brock Purdy gets a sack and now it's Sam Darnold season, I'm going to feel kind of dumb for suggesting sitting him. So it's definitely, I'm glad I'm not the coach because it seems like a hard decision to
That's a
make.
tough one.
But
It's definitely injuries are always the tough ones.
yeah. Now, are you worried about Aaron Banks, who also didn't practice? Because that would be scary if multiple offensive linemen were injured for the game. He had an ankle and he did not practice yesterday.
Yeah,
Obviously, practice hasn't started yet today, but that's um,
I don't take
concerning.
too much stock in the first day. I mean, I'm not concerned. I think it's one to monitor for sure. But Aaron Banks was on the injury report last week, I believe, with the bicep injury as well. So I would assume
Yeah,
you're trying to give him as much time off as possible to heal. And so this week, I believe he was on with an ankle injury, which
yeah,
wasn't the case last week. So I mean, it's another thing you got to
probably
monitor.
not.
But
Yeah, he stayed in the
he
he
didn't.
stayed in the game the whole time, so hopefully
Yeah.
nothing too
So we'll see how
serious.
it goes, but it might just be one of the rest days overall for him.